Hi, it's Richard in the Old Okie Workshop. Welcome to Wooden Boxes Round 2. Here's my drawer with wooden screws. And I want to make this drawer look more like this drawer, which contains the machine screws. Now, machine screws, normally I'm just grabbing 2 of these or 4 of these and taking them to the workbench. And I need a screw, and I need a nut, and I need a washer of some type, flat washer, split washer, tooth washer, whatever. So I come over here, get those materials, and go to the workbench. So I don't need to take this box with me. But down here, that's not the case. In the case of wood screws, I generally need, I don't know, maybe a dozen, maybe 16 or so screws for what I'm doing. So generally I'll just grab the box, take it over to the workbench and get the screws out. And I don't need a nut, I don't need a washer, and so on. So I want to be able to get the boxes out of here easily, and that means I'm going to have to do something different from this, because these are hard to pick out of here because they're in there so tight. So I'm going to have to figure that out. Here is my plan. I'm going to make the back of the box higher or taller than the front of the box. So when I've got a box here, this is the back, this is the front, back of this box, front of this box, right? And I'll be able to pick this up because this is taller, so I can grab it like this and pull it up like that. And that's how I can get those boxes out of there more easily. And I just did this by eyeball, and it turns out, I measured this, and it turns out that the dimension of this is 1/2 inch greater than this dimension. So that makes it cool. So I'm going to make the backs 1/2 inch taller than the fronts. I brought the drawer over to the workbench, and I got some of the screws out and got some wood boxes, put them in wood in these little boxes, you know, and I made this box as a mock-up, and I put some dimensions in here. And I finally decided that I want some things about this size. I think I got all that worked out. Didn't know what to do about the longer, bigger screws, and it occurred to me that they sell them in a box this size, so why not a little wooden box that is about these dimensions? That ought to work okay. So here's the plan I came up with. Here's the plan for the front to back dimensions of the boxes. The inside of the drawer is 18 inches inside dimension. Okay, so the boxes have got to add up to something less than that because I want some slack in there, because I don't want them crammed in front to back. So I decided on these dimensions for the 4 boxes, to be the 4 rows of boxes going across. 3 3/4, 4, 4 1/2, and 5. And that adds up to 17 1/4, which is 3/4 of an inch less than 18, obviously. So I've got some slack in there, which is what I want. So here's the 3 3/4 inch outside dimension box right here. All right. So the front and the back of these boxes is going to be 1/2 inch material. That means that the inside dimension needs to be 1 inch less than the outside dimension, or 2 3/4. So here are the inside dimensions of these rows of boxes. Now, that's important when it comes time to lay out the fronts and backs on a piece of plywood. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to lay out all the fronts and backs on a large sheet of plywood, and then I'm going to cut the boxes out of that. So here's a corner of a large sheet of plywood, and we're going to look at this row of boxes back here. So I'm going to place 3/4 inch material on this, that'll be a back, and then I'm going to have a front and a back together for the next row of boxes, and that will be 2 pieces of 3/4 inch material, and I'm going to take a 1/4 inch off of this, leaving a 1/2 inch, and a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch out of the middle of these two, leaving a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch, and so on. And that's the way I'm going to lay this out. So what that means is it's the inside dimension of these boxes that becomes important when it comes out to laying these strips out. which are going to eventually be the fronts and backs of the boxes. Here's the layout for the width dimension of the boxes. Inside dimension of the drawer is 17 1/2 inches, so they've got to fit within that. And I want them to add up to less than that, so I've got some slack. So I decided on 2.5 inch, three columns of 2.5 inch boxes, and then 3 columns of 3 1/8 inch wide boxes, which add up to 7.5, 9 3/8. That adds up to 16 7/8, so I'm good to go. So I have 5/8 of an inch slack going across. Now the inside dimension on this is important because that's how I'm going to rip strips out of this big piece of plywood. So just looking at the sides, here is a box looking at the sides only, and if this is the 2.5 inch box, then the sides are going to be a 1/4 inch material, and that means that the inside dimension needs to be a 1/2 inch less than the outside dimension. So that's the critical dimension that I'm going to rip this strip out of this piece of plywood after I actually get the fronts and backs glued on. So the 3/8 inch box, then outside dimension will be 2 5/8 inside dimension when I lay those out. Here's a side view of the boxes, row 1, 2, 3, and 4, and showing the fronts and the backs. Now I'm going to use 1 3/8 inch material for the sides for the first 2 rows of boxes, 1 3/4 inch wide material for the second and for the third and fourth, the last 2 rows of boxes. So when I have a 1/4 inch plywood bottom, that means that the front of these boxes needs to be 1/4 inch less than 1 3/8, which is 1 1/8. So that's this piece and this piece. Now the back needs to be 1/2 inch higher than the front of this box so I can grab it, right? So that means this back has got to be 1 5/8. But this back has got to be a 1/2 inch more than this front. And this front needs to be 1 3/4 minus the 1/4 inch bottom, which is 1 1/2. So the back of this box and this box need to be 2 inches high. So that's the layout on the thing. So now I'm going to cut those out and start placing these fronts and backs on the piece of plywood. I've got all the fronts and backs of the boxes cut, and I've placed them on here, and I've used these inside dimensions, all right, to measure where these things go. So this one's 2 3/4, this dimension here is 3, and then 3 1/2, and then 4, and so that sets where all these things go. And I have also measured overall from here down to here. I got 19 3/8. Now that's larger than the 17 1/4 I want, but what's going to happen is, to make this a 1/2 inch, I'm going to take a 1/4 inch off of this, and I'm going to take a 1/4 off of this and a 1/4 off of this, a 1/2, which is a 1/2 total. Same thing here, and a 1/4 off back there. That's 2 inches that I'm going to lose out of this thing. So if I take 2 inches away from 19 3/8, I get 17 3/8, and what I wanted was 17 1/4, so I'm calling that good. Besides, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cuts on this, and who knows what the heck it's going to wind up. If I get something close to 17 1/4, that's going to be great. Okay, so now it's time to start gluing these things down, and I've got to do that by altitude. So I'm going to have to glue these 2 guys down, then this one, then I got to glue these 2 guys down, and then this one, this one, this one, because of the way I'm going to clamp this thing down. Here's another glue up of a couple of the, these are the fronts of row, looks like 3 and 4. using Newton's force. Here is the glue up of the backs of rows 2 and 3 and 4, and that is the final glue up. This is the highest altitude pieces, 2 inches. The fronts and backs of all the boxes have been glued to the bottom. And now it is time to start cutting out the strips or the columns of boxes this way. Well, it's a really nice day here in Oklahoma. It's winter time, but it's warmish outside, so I'm moving operations outside because this produces a little bit of sawdust, and although I've got a good vacuum and a dust deputy, it won't get it all. So this is the first cut. Now this cut I'm going to make an inch wider than necessary. The first cut's got to be 2 inches. I'm going to make this at 3 because these are not even on this side, and that's okay, because I'm going to waste an inch off of this side right here when I turn this back around and run it through at 2 inches. So here we go with the first cut. Okay, now I'm going to take the piece I just cut off, I'm going to turn it around this way, I'm going to run it through at 2 inches, and I'm going to cut 2 more out of this at 2 inches, because that's what's required for the 2 1/2 inch wide boxes. Now here we go with the 3 1/8 inch wide boxes, which have to be cut at 2 5/8. All 6 columns have been cut now, and I have this left over. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 more big ones and 1 little one out of this. The strips of boxes have now been cut out, and it's time to put the sides on. So I'm going to cut some little pieces like this, and then like this, and so then I'm going to glue those on. We'll get those glued on, then we're going to cut the individual boxes out, and we'll finally have them free boxes. Now it's time to glue the sides onto the strip of boxes, and so here's where I'm going to do that. I'm going to place glue along the bottom edge and along the fronts and backs like this, and turn this over, put it in the vise, clamp it down, glue this edge like that. Then this goes on here, okay? Then these pieces will be placed on there, and then they'll stick on there because the glue will make them just, you know, make them stay on there like that. Then 2x4s get placed on each side, and the 2x4s, this distance here is wider than this board here, which allows me to then take this whole assembly, put it down into the vise, and clamp it down and let the glue dry. So then when I get this clamped in here, there's a trick that I want to show you. So we'll get started. But first, glue up one side. Device we go. Glue on the other side. Now onto this board. a little squeeze out going. And then the trick. Pull this board out. Got glue on it. So use the putty knife to remove the glue. Here you go, ready for the next time. All of the sides are now glued onto the boxes, and it's now time to cut them apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the front of each one of these boxes, and to do that I've marked a line here such that this thickness will be about 1/2 inch. So I have a little jig that I made to do that. This is 1/2 inch thick. Put this little guy down here, make this mark, go to here, make this mark, make this mark, and like that. So all those have been marked, so I'm ready to cut them out now. There are the boxes all cut apart, and all of the fronts of the boxes are 1/2 inch thick. And so now it is the job to cut the backs off. So the backs are going to get cut off. And since I want them to be exactly the same size, I'll do a setup with a stop block. So I'll have this against the fence, run it through the saw this way to cut this off, stop block here, and I run these through. Then I reset the stop block for these and these and these because they're all different dimensions front to back. Okay, the stop block is set, so as you can see, so we're ready to push a set of them through. There they are, all cut out. Fronts and backs about 1/2 inch thick, just like I wanted. Nice uniform sizes. So let's see how they fit in the drawer. So let's take a look at how it turned out. Ooh, how sweet is that? So it worked out just great. There's a gap in here and there's a gap here in the front to allow for some movement around because you don't want these so tight because it's difficult to pull these out. The dimensions worked out almost perfectly. This was to be 17 1/4. It wound up around 17, and of course 17 1/4 would be a maximum, so I did not want it to get bigger. So it's a little bit shorter, but keep in mind that there were 8 cuts at the one at the beginning and one at the back of each one of these boxes. And in order to try and get this 3/4 inch piece down to a 1/2 inch, and I was doing that by eye, so that makes it 1/32 of an inch off each box. So that's not too bad. The width dimension was supposed to be 16 7/8, and it wound up about 17, so that actually did get a little bit bigger. So anyway, we're still good to go on that. Now, one of the unintended consequences of this thing is that I decided that I wanted the taller portion, which I've been calling the back of the box. I wanted it on this back row. I didn't want to have to reach way back here, so I turned these around. Well, when I turned them around, I realized that pulling this out is a much more natural motion to go like that than it is to try and pull it out this way, okay? So I turned them all around. So now I have the tall portion, which was supposed to be the back, is now the front on all these. And so I can just pull it out like that. So that worked out great. Anyway, I'm quite happy with it. So there you go. Here's the boxes and packages that the screws came out of. and here's the extra wood boxes that I had left over from the project. One last thing I wish I had done. These are the backs, the tails that are left over, and the boxes were down this way, okay? And I wish I'd thought about putting another board across here like this. They would not be obviously part of the boxes that go in that drawer, but I could have had an extra set of boxes this way if I'd done that. So next time when I do this and I wind up with the layout of the boxes coming up to here, I'll just go ahead and do that and have an extra set of boxes. You can always use some extra boxes. So that concludes Wood Boxes 2. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.